Ryan felt a sudden jolt, like an invisible force pushing against him. The air seemed to thicken, slowing his fall even more. He didn't know if it was a freak wind gust or something else, but he wasn't questioning it. He kept his body spread, his eyes locked on the drop zone. At 500 feet, he braced himself, tucking his chin and curling his knees to protect his spine. The ground was seconds away. Ryan hit the sand with a bone-jarring thud. Pain exploded through his body, legs, back, shoulders. He rolled, tumbling across the desert, his camera shattering against a rock. When he finally stopped, he lay there, gasping, staring at the sky. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. The aftermath? The stunt team landed nearby, rushing to Ryan's side. They thought he was dead, but when they saw him moving, they started shouting for help. Paramedics from the airfield arrived, stunned to find him conscious. Ryan had broken both legs, fractured his pelvis, and cracked several ribs, but he was breathing. Doctors later said it was a miracle he survived a combination of his body surfing technique, a possible updraft, and landing in soft sand instead of rock. The odds of surviving a 14-0-foot fall without a parachute were less than 1 in a million. Ryan spent months in the hospital, enduring surgeries and physical therapy. His skydiving days were over, but he didn't care. He was alive, and that was enough. He later learned his parachute rig had a rare defecta tangled deployment line that jammed both the main and reserve chutes. The manufacturer issued a recall, and Ryan's story became a cautionary tale in the skydiving world. But Ryan never forgot that strange jolt in the air, that moment when the wind seemed to catch him. He didn't talk about it much, but privately, he wondered if something or someone had intervened. His girlfriend swore it was his guardian angel. Ryan wasn't sure, but he started wearing a small cross necklace, just in case. And that's the story of the skydiving photographer without a parachute, folks. A tale of survival against all odds, with a twist that makes you wonder if there's more to this world than we can see. If you're ever jumping out of a plane, double-check your gear, and maybe say a quick prayer just to be safe. So, what do you think? Ever had a moment where you beat the odds in a way you can't explain? Drop it in the comments. And next time you're looking up at the sky, maybe give a nod to Ryan. He's proof that sometimes miracles happen at 120 miles per hour. The Gray Blanket. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's gonna burrow deep into your mind and refuse to leave. Fans call it a living nightmare, and trust me, they're not kidding. It's the kind of tale that feels like it's ripped straight from your darkest dreams. We're heading to a remote village in Japan where a young woman's quiet life turned into something so unsettling, it's hard to shake off. This is the story of the Gray Blanket, a tale of fear, mystery, and something that might not be human at all. So, grab a warm drink, keep a light on, and let's dive into a story that's as creepy as it gets. The setup, picture this. It's 2017, and we're in a tiny village in Aomori Prefecture, northern Japan. Think winding dirt roads, old wooden houses with sloping roofs, and dense forests that seem to swallow the sunlight. The village is quiet, almost frozen in time, the kind of place where the loudest sound is the wind rustling through the pines. This is where Hana Sato lives, a 24-year-old teacher who left the chaos of Tokyo for a simpler life. Hana's a city girl at heart, used to neon lights and crowded trains, but she's fallen in love with the countryside's peace. The crisp mountain air, the starry nights, the way the peaks loom like silent guardian sits a world away from her old life. Hana rents a small, traditional house on the edge of the village, where the forest begins. It's a modest place of sliding paper doors, tatami mats that smell faintly of straw, and a tiny wood stove to keep the chill at bay. The house is old, its beams creaking with every gust of wind, but Hana makes it her own. She fills it with books, potted plants, and a cozy futon where she reads late into the night. The landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kimura, is kind but stern. When Hana moves in, Mrs. Kimura gives her a warning. "Don't go into the forest at night. It's not safe." Her eyes are serious, almost haunted. Hana nods, thinking it's just old superstition. She's not one for ghost stories. At least, not yet. One chilly autumn evening, Hana's walking home from the village's elementary school, where she teaches English. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She passes a small flea market in the village square, just a few rickety tables with old clothes, chipped teacups, and dusty knickknacks. At one stall, run by a quiet old man with deep-set eyes, she spots something odd. A gray wool blanket, neatly folded, sitting alone on the table. It's plain, almost boring, but something about it pulls her in. The wool is unnaturally soft, like stroking a cloud, and it seems to shimmer faintly in the fading light, as if it's catching the last rays of the sun. The old man notices her interest and speaks in a low, raspy voice. "That one's special," he says. "Keeps you warm no matter how cold it gets. Only 500 yen. That's about $5 a steal." Hana buys it, thinking it'll be perfect for the frosty nights ahead. She tucks it under her arm and heads home, unaware that she's just invited something into her life. The first night? That night, Hana lays the gray blanket over her futon. The house is cold, the wind rattling the paper doors, so she's grateful for the extra warmth. She snuggles under the blanket, and it's incredible. It's heavy but comforting, wrapping her in a cocoon of soft wool that feels like a warm embrace. She falls asleep faster than usual, the distant whispers of the forest fading into silence. But around 2 a.m., she bolts awake, her heart pounding like a drum. The room is freezing, her breath puffing out in clouds. The blanket is still on her, but it feels different. Not warm anymore, but heavy, almost suffocating, like it's pressing her into the futon, pinning her down. Hana sits up, shoving the blanket off. Her skin prickles with unease. She glances around the room. Everything looks normal. The paper doors are closed, the stove is cold, and her lantern casts a soft glow over her books and plants. But the air feels thick, charged with a strange energy, like the moment before a storm. She notices a faint smell, like wet earth or mold, lingering in the room. It's coming from the blanket. She lifts it, checking for dampness or dirt, but it's dry, clean, almost too perfect. Shaking her head, she tells herself it's just her imagination. She's tired, stressed from adjusting to village life. She pulls the blanket back over her and tries to sleep. That's when the dreams start. In her dream, Hana's standing in the forest behind her house. It's pitch black, the trees towering like giants, their branches clawing at the starry sky. She's barefoot, the ground cold and slick with moss. In the distance, she sees a figura, gray, shapeless mass, like a person wrapped in a blanket. It's motionless, but she feels its gaze heavy and unyielding. Her legs won't move, rooted to the ground. The figure drifts closer, silent, and she hears a sound, a low, hissing whisper. Not quite words, but sharp enough to make her skin crawl. She wakes up gasping, her lantern flickering. The blanket is still there, warm and heavy, but now it feels alive, like it's watching her. Things get stranger. The next morning, Hana's shaken but tries to brush it off. Dreams are just dreams, right? She heads to school, teaching her classes, but she's off her game. She forgets students' names, drops her chalk, spaces out during lessons. Her kids notice, asking if she's okay. She forces a smile, but her mind keeps drifting to the blanket, to that gray figure in her dream. By evening, she's exhausted and heads home, dreading the thought of sleeping under that blanket again. But it's so cold, and the futon feels empty without it. She hesitates, then pulls it over her, promising herself it's just one more night. The dream returns, worse this time. She's back in the forest, the air thick with fog. The gray figure is closer now, its edges blurry, like it's made of smoke. It glides toward her, and the hissing grows louder, forming fractured words she can't understand, sharp, guttural sounds that twist in her mind. She feels a weight on her chest, like something sitting on her, crushing her lungs. She wakes up, heart racing, and the blanket is tangled around her, tighter than it should be, almost knotted. She throws it off, her hands trembling, and notices faint gray marks on her arms, like smudges of ash. They wash off in the sink, but the sight makes her stomach churn. Over the next few days, the weirdness escalates. The blanket starts moving. Not dramatically, but subtly. Hana finds it in strange places, draped over her reading chair, folded neatly at the foot of her futon, even though she's sure she stuffed it in the closet. The moldy, earthy smell grows stronger, clinging to the blanket like a shadow. Her house feels different, too colder, darker, like the lantern's light can't reach the corners anymore. At night, she hears whispers, not just in her dreams, but in the waking world. Soft, hissing sounds, like someone standing just behind her, just out of sight. She spins around, but no one's there. The paper doors rattle, even when there's no wind. Hana's life starts to fall apart. She's barely sleeping, her eyes ringed with dark circles. At school, she's snapping at students, forgetting lessons, losing her patience. Her friend, Eiko, another teacher, pulls her aside one day. "Hana, you look like a ghost," she says. "What's going on?" Hana hesitates, then spills everything, the blanket, the dreams, the whispers, the moving shadows. Aiko's face goes pale. "Get rid of it," she says, her voice low. "My grandmother used to talk about objects like that, things that carry spirits. They latch onto you, feed on you." Hana tries to laugh, but it comes out weak. Deep down, she knows Aiko's right. Something's wrong with that blanket. Digging deeper, desperate for answers, Hana goes back to the village square, looking for the old man from the flea market. But his stall is gone, like it was never there. She asks around, and a shopkeeper tells her the man only shows up once a month, always with strange things, to sell items that seem to vanish as quickly as they appear. No one knows his name or where he lives. Some villagers whisper he's not from Aomori at all, that he's tied to the forest somehow. Hana's heart sinks. She's stuck with this thing, and it's not letting go. She visits Mrs. Kimura, her landlord, hoping for some clue. When Hana mentions the gray blanket, Mrs. Kimura's eyes widen, and she grips the edge of her table. "You didn't bring that into my house, did you?" she whispers, her voice trembling. She tells Hana a story from the village's past, one she heard as a child. Decades ago, a woman named Yuki lived in Hana's house. Yuki was a recluse, shunned by the village for practicing strange rituals in the forest offerings to spirits, chants under the moon. One winter, she was found dead, frozen in her house, wrapped in a gray blanket. Villagers said her spirit never left, that it clung to the blanket, seeking someone new to haunt. The blanket disappeared after her death, but every few years it finds someone, a traveler, a villager, someone who doesn't know better. Those who take it don't stay long. Hana's blood runs cold. She thinks back to the old man's words, "Keeps you warm, no matter how cold it gets." Was he warning her or luring her? She rushes home, her mind racing. The blanket is waiting, folded neatly on her futon, even though she's sure she left it in the closet. The air in the house is heavy, the smell overpowering. She grabs a flashlight and checks every corner, half expecting to see that gray figure from her dreams. The whispers start again, louder now, circling her like a predator. She swears she sees a shadow move across the paper doors, but when she looks, it's gone. The breaking point. That night, Hana can't take it anymore. She grabs the blanket, stuffs it into a trash bag, and drives to a river a few miles away. The moon is full, casting an eerie glow over the water. She plans to throw the blanket in, let the current take it, but as she lifts the bag, she hears the hissing, louder than ever, like a swarm of angry insects. The bag feels heavier, almost alive, pulling against her grip. The air turns icy, her breath fogging in front of her. She drops the bag, and it hits the ground with a thud, the blanket spilling out. For a moment, she sees Ida, gray, shapeless figure, rising from the wool like smoke, its edges blurring into the night. The hissing forms a word, "Stay." Hana screams and runs, not looking back. She drives to Aiko's house, sobbing, and spends the night there. The next morning, she returns to the river with Aiko, but the bag and blanket are gone. The ground is bare, no sign of them, like they were never there. Hana's shaking, but a small part of her feels relieved. Maybe it's over. The aftermath? Hana moves back to Tokyo the next week, leaving the village and the house behind. She tells herself it's a fresh start, but she's not the same. She's jumpy, always checking corners, waking up at 2 a.m., expecting to hear whispers. She avoids blankets, sticking to thin sheets, and keeps every light on at night. Aiko stays in touch, saying the village has been quiet since Hana left, but Mrs. Kimura refuses to rent the house again. Some villagers claim they've seen a gray shape in the forest at night, drifting among the trees, its edges shimmering like moonlight on water. Years later, Hana stumbles across a blog post from another part of Japan. Someone bought a gray blanket at a flea market, cheap and oddly soft. They describe the same dreams forests, shadows, hissing whispers. They mention waking up with gray marks on their skin, finding the blanket in strange places. The post cuts off mid-sentence with no further updates. Hannah shudders, wondering where the blanket is now, who it's found next. Sometimes, at night, she feels a faint weight on her chest, hears a distant hiss, like the forest is calling her back. And that's the story of the gray blanket, folks. A simple purchase that turned into a nightmare, a reminder that some things carry more than just weight, they carry intent. If you're ever at a flea market and see a gray blanket that seems too perfect, too cheap, walk away. Because some objects aren't just objects, they're traps, waiting for someone to claim them. So, what do you think? Ever had a dream that felt too real or brought home something that didn't feel right? Drop it in the comments. And maybe, just maybe, check your blankets tonight. You never know what's woven into the threads. The perfect bait. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's going to hit you like a punch you didn't see coming. Fans love this tale for its slow build and jaw-dropping twist, and trust me, it's a wild ride. What starts as a relaxing vacation turns into a nightmare so shocking, it'll make you rethink your next getaway. This is the story of the perfect Baita tale of trust, betrayal, and a truth that changes everything. So, grab a snack, maybe check your travel plans, and let's dive into a story that's as deceptive as it is chilling. The setup, picture this. It's 2018, and we're on the sunny shores of Key West, Florida. Think turquoise waves lapping at white sand beaches, palm trees swaying in the breeze, and the smell of salt water and sunscreen in the air. It's the kind of place where you go to forget your worries, sip a cold drink, and let the world fade away. This is where we meet Alex and Mia Carter, a young couple from Chicago, both in their late 20s. Alex is a graphic designer, Mia is a marketing coordinator, and they're the kind of couple who seem to have it all great jobs, a cute apartment, and a love that's been rock solid since college. Life in Chicago was hectic, though. Long hours, endless emails, and winters that felt like they'd never end. So, when Mia's boss gave her a week off, they jumped at the chance for a tropical escape. They booked a fishing trip in Key West, a 5-day adventure on a private charter boat, complete with deep-sea fishing, snorkeling, and lazy days under the sun. It was their dream vacation, a chance to unplug and make memories. They found a charter online, Real Paradise, run by a guy named Captain Mike. The reviews were glowing 5 stars, pictures of happy families holding massive fish, and promises of an unforgettable experience. Alex and Mia were sold. They packed their bags, flew to Florida, and couldn't wait to hit the water. The first day, the couple arrived in Key West on a bright Monday morning, the air warm and salty. They met Captain Mike at the DACA-tanned, wiry guy in his 50s with a scruffy beard and a wide grin. He was all charm, cracking jokes and offering them cold sodas as they boarded his boat, a 40-foot fishing vessel called the Sea Star. The boat was weathered but clean, with fishing rods lined up along the deck and a small cabin for shade. Mike's deckhand, a quiet guy named Tommy, nodded hello but kept to himself, tinkering with the gear. Alex and Mia felt at ease. This was going to be perfect. The first day was everything they'd hoped for. Mike took them out to the open water, the boat slicing through waves as dolphins trailed in the wake. They fished for hours, reeling in a few snapper and laughing as Mia struggled with a feisty grouper. Mike was a great guide, pointing out good spots and sharing stories about his years on the water. Tommy stayed in the background, cleaning fish and prepping bait, but he was polite enough. By sunset, Alex and Mia were sunburned, happy, and sipping beers as the Sea Star cruised back to shore. They fell asleep in their hotel that night, dreaming of the days ahead. The calm before. The next 2 days were more of the same pure bliss. They caught bigger fish, snorkeled over coral reefs, and even saw a sea turtle glide by. Mike was the perfect host, always ready with a story or a cold drink. He told them about a secret fishing spot, a remote reef called Devil's Point, about 20 miles offshore. "It's tricky to get to," he said, his eyes glinting, "but the fish there are monsters. You up for it?" Alex and Mia were all in. They trusted Mike, and the idea of a hidden gem sounded thrilling. On the 4th day, they set out for Devil's Point. The water was calmer than usual, the sky a perfect blue. The Sea Star hummed along, and Alex and Mia lounged on the deck, snapping selfies and soaking in the sun. Tommy was quieter than usual, his eyes darting to the horizon, but they didn't think much of it. Mike was his usual chatty self, pointing out a flock of pelicans diving for fish. "This is going to be a day you'll never forget," he said, grinning. Alex and Mia nodded, unaware how right he was. As they approached Devil's Point, the vibe shifted. The reef was surrounded by deep, dark water, the kind that looks like it could swallow you whole. The boat rocked gently, but the air felt heavier, like a storm was brewing, even though the sky was clear. Mike dropped anchor, and they started fishing. The bites came fast, huge fish, bigger than anything they'd caught before. Alex reeled in a massive marlin, his arms burning from the fight. Mia cheered, snapping pictures. It was exhilarating, but something felt off. Tommy was nowhere to be seen, and Mike's grin seemed forced, his eyes flicking to the cabin more than usual. The nightmare. That night, Mike suggested they stay anchored at Devil's Point for a moonlight fishing session. "The big ones come out after dark," he said. Alex and Mia were tired but excited, picturing a starry night on the water. They agreed, and Mike handed them beers as the sun set, the sky turning a deep purple. The boat was quiet, the only sounds, the lapping waves and the creak of the deck. Tommy finally appeared, carrying a bucket of bait, but he avoided eye contact, his hands shaking slightly. Around 10 p.m., Mia started feeling woozy. She thought it was the beer, or maybe seasickness, but her vision blurred, and her legs felt like jelly. She looked at Alex, who was slumping in his chair, his eyes half closed. "Something's wrong," she mumbled, her words slurring. Before she could stand, she collapsed, the world going black. When Mia woke up, her head was pounding, and her wrists were bound with rope. She was in the boat's cabin, lying on the floor, the air thick with the smell of fish and diesel. Alex was next to her, unconscious, his hands tied too. Panic surged through her. She tried to scream, but her mouth was dry, her voice weak. The cabin door creaked open, and Mike stepped in, his grin gone. His face was cold, his eyes empty. Tommy stood behind him, looking nervous, but silent. "What's going on?" Mia croaked, her heart racing. Mike crouched down, his voice low. "You're the perfect bait," he said. "Rich, young, nobody around. You're worth more than any fish out here." Mia's stomach dropped. She realized they'd been drugged, lured out to this remote spot for something far worse than fishing. Mike explained, almost casually, that he and Tommy worked for a smuggling ring. They used the Sea Star to move drugs, but every so often, they'd pick up cargo people. Tourists who wouldn't be missed right away sold to traffickers for a hefty price. Alex and Mia, with no family in Key West and a week-long trip, were perfect targets. The fight, Mia's mind raced. She had to get them out of this. She pretended to be weaker than she was, slumping against the wall while listening for any chance to act. Alex stirred, groaning, and Mike kicked him hard in the ribs. "Stay down!" he growled. But that was Mike's mistake. The pain snapped Alex awake, adrenaline kicking in. He lunged at Mike, despite his tied hands, knocking him into the cabin wall. Mia seized the moment, scrambling to her feet and grabbing a fishing knife from a nearby table. She slashed at Tommy, who yelped and stumbled back, giving her time to cut Alex's ropes. The cabin was chaos shouts, crashing equipment, the boat rocking wildly. Mike recovered, pulling a gun from his belt, but Alex tackled him again, the two men grappling for control. Mia slashed her own ropes and lunged at Tommy, who was trying to radio for help. She knocked the radio from his hands, shattering it against the floor. Alex managed to wrench the gun from Mike, but in the struggle, It fired. The bullet grazing Mike's shoulder. He screamed, blood soaking his shirt, and fell back. Mia and Alex didn't wait. They bolted for the deck, the night air hitting them like a slap. The boat was still anchored, the dark water stretching endlessly around them. They heard Mike shouting, Tommy scrambling after them. Alex grabbed a flare gun from the deck and fired it into the sky, hoping anyone would see it. Mia found a life raft tethered to the side and started untying it, her hands shaking. "We have to go!" she yelled. Mike burst onto the deck, blood dripping, his face twisted with rage. He lunged at Alex, but Mia swung a fishing gaff, catching him in the leg. He collapsed, cursing, as Alex shoved the life raft into the water. They jumped in, paddling frantically, the Sea Star shrinking behind them. Tommy didn't follow. He was too busy trying to help Mike. The flare burned bright overhead, a red streak against the stars. The aftermath. Hours later, a Coast Guard helicopter spotted the flare and found Alex and Mia drifting in the life raft, exhausted but alive. They were dehydrated, battered, and traumatized, but they'd survived. The Coast Guard raided the Sea Star, arresting Mike and Tommy, who confessed to the smuggling and trafficking operation. The Real Paradise charter was shut down, and investigators uncovered a network that had been targeting tourists for years. Alex and Mia's quick thinking had blown it wide open. Back in Chicago, the couple tried to move on, but the trip changed them. Mia quit her job, unable to handle the stress, and started therapy to cope with the nightmares. Alex sold his camera, swearing off adventure photos. They rarely spoke about Key West, but they kept the flare gun, a reminder of their fight to survive. The media called them heroes, but they didn't feel like it. They just felt lucky. And that's the story of The Perfect Bait, folks. A vacation that seemed like paradise, only to turn into a trap with a twist no one saw coming. If you're planning a trip, check those reviews a little closer. Because sometimes, the perfect getaway is just bait for something much darker. So, what do you think? Ever had a vacation take a turn you didn't expect? Drop it in the comments. And next time you're on a boat, maybe keep an eye on the captain. You never know what's lurking beneath the surface. What I saw in my room still haunts me. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's gonna sink its claws into you and never let go. It's personal, it's raw, and it's the kind of thing that sticks with you no matter how many years pass. Fans call this a classic, and trust me, it's not hard to see why it's a story from my own childhood, something that happened when I was just a kid, something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. This is the night I saw something in my room, something that still haunts me all these years later. So, settle in, maybe keep every light in the house on, and let's dive into a tale that's as unsettling as it gets. The setup, picture this. It's 1995, and I'm 10 years old, living in a small town in Massachusetts. Think quiet streets, colonial houses, and fields that stretch out toward the horizon. My family lived on the edge of town in an old, creaky house that seemed to groan with every gust of wind. It was a classic New England home two stories, weathered clapboard siding, wooden floors that creaked under your feet, and a big, overgrown backyard that bled into a dense forest. The trees out there were tall and gnarled, their branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. My parents loved the place, always going on about its character and history. Me? I thought it was creepy. The house always felt off, like it was watching you, waiting for something. But I was a kid, so I pushed the feeling down. Kids do that, right? You tell yourself it's just your imagination running wild. My bedroom was on the second floor, at the end of a long, narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper. It was a small room, but it was my sanctuary cozy in the way only a kid's room can be. I had a single window that looked out over the backyard and the dark wall of trees beyond. The view was pretty at night, with stars twinkling above the forest, but it also made me uneasy, like something could be staring back from the shadows. My walls were plastered with superhero posters, Spider-Man, Batman, the usual, and my desk was a mess of comic books, action figures, and half-finished drawings. By my bed was a little nightlight shaped like a baseball, its soft orange glow, a constant companion. I wasn't scared of the dark, not really. But that nightlight made me feel safer, like it could keep the monsters at bay. My bed was pushed right up against the wall, under the window, so I could lie there and watch the stars before drifting off. My parents were great, but they were strict about bedtime. Every night at 9 p.m., it was lights out, no arguments. That night, the night it all went down, was just like any other. It was a chilly fall evening, the kind where the air bites your nose and the wind rattles the windows like it's trying to get in. I'd finished my homework, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed, pulling the blankets up to my chin. My mom came in, her footsteps soft on the creaky floor. She tucked me in, smoothing my hair, and gave me a smile. "Sleep tight, kiddo," she said, flipping off the overhead light. The baseball nightlight glowed softly, casting warm shadows across the room. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. You know that sound. How old houses creak and groan like they're alive, telling stories you don't want to hear. I closed my eyes, letting the wind's hum lull me towards sleep. The night it happened. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was late. Really late. The house was dead quiet, except for the faint, mournful hum of the wind outside. Something felt wrong. It was like the air itself had changed, pressing against my skin, making my heart beat a little faster. My body knew something was off before my brain caught up. I opened my eyes, blinking in the dim glow of the nightlight. Everything looked normal me posters, my desk, the clutter of my childhood. But the feeling wouldn't go away, like a weight sitting on my chest. Then I noticed it. The air was heavy, thicker than it should be, like someone had cranked the heat to stifling. And there was a smell faint but unmistakable, like damp earth, old leaves, or something you'd find in a forgotten corner of a basement. It wasn't strong, but it was there, curling into my nose, making my stomach twist. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes, trying to shake off the unease. That's when I heard Ita sound. A faint, scratching noise, slow and deliberate, coming from the corner of the room near the closet. My closet was a tiny, narrow space with a sliding door that never worked right. It was always half open, just enough to let your imagination run wild about what might be hiding inside. I stared at it, my heart starting to pound, the sound growing louder in my ears. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like nails dragging across wood, slow and intentional, each scrape sending a shiver down my spine. I told myself it was probably a mouse. Old houses have mice, right? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The sound was too purposeful, like something was trying to get my attention. I reached for my flashlight on the nightstand. Yep, I was that kid who kept a flashlight by the bed, just in case, and gripped it tightly. My hands were shaking as I aimed the beam at the closet, the light cutting through the orange glow of the nightlight. The half-open door loomed in the shadows, the gap a black void. I held my breath, expecting to see glowing eyes or a scurrying shape. But there was nothing, just a pile of clothes on the floor, my old sneakers, a baseball bat leaning against the wall. I let out a shaky breath, whispering to myself, "You're being stupid. It's nothing." But then I saw it. In the corner of my eye, something moved. Not in the closet, but by the window, right above my bed. My heart stopped. I didn't want to look, didn't want to turn my head, but my eyes flicked to the side, and there it was, a shadow. Not a normal shadow, like from a tree outside or my desk lamp. This was different. It was tall, humanoid, but blurry, like it wasn't fully there. Its edges smudged against the moonlight streaming through the window. It stood perfectly still, blocking the stars. A dark silhouette that seemed to suck the light out of the room. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, stuck in my throat like a stone. My whole body felt pinned to the bed, my muscles frozen, like the air itself was holding me down. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. That's the only way I can describe it, like its gaze was boring into me, heavy and cold, even though I couldn't see a face. The air grew thicker, the damp earth smell stronger, now mixed with something sour, like decay. My nightlight flickered, just for a second, and in that flicker, the shadow shifted. It leaned closer, its blurry form stretching toward me, long arms dangling unnaturally low. I don't know where I found the courage, but I finally moved. My hand fumbled with the flashlight, and I flicked it on, aiming the beam right at the thing. For a split second, I saw it clearly not a shadow, but a figure, tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its face wasn't a face, just a blank, pale oval, smooth as bone, with two dark, empty holes where eyes should be. No mouth, no nose, but I swear it was smiling, a cruel, knowing smile that made my blood run cold. The figure shimmered like heat rising off pavement, then vanished, like it had been sucked into the air itself. I screamed, a raw, desperate sound that tore through the silence. The nightlight flickered again and went out completely, plunging the room into darkness except for my flashlight, which I waved around like a madman, searching for the thing. But it was gone. The air lightened, the smell faded, but my heart was still hammering, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold the flashlight. My parents burst into the room, the overhead light snapping on. "What's wrong?" my mom yelled, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. My dad was right behind her, looking ready to fight off an intruder, his fists clenched. I was shaking, babbling incoherently about the figure by the window, the scratching, the smell. They checked the room, pulling open the closet, shining their own flashlight under the bed, even stepping outside to inspect the yard. Nothing. No footprints, no broken locks, no sign anyone had been there. My dad sat on my bed, his voice gentle but firm. "It was just a nightmare, buddy," he said. "You're okay." But I knew it wasn't a dream. I'd been awake. I'd seen it. The days after, that night changed me. I refused to sleep in my room for weeks, maybe months. I'd drag my blanket to the living room and camp out on the couch, the TV on low to drown out the silence. My parents thought I was just spooked, a kid with an overactive imagination. They didn't push me to go back, but I could tell they were worried. My mom started checking on me more, asking if I was okay, if I wanted to talk. I didn't. How do you explain something like that? How do you describe a thing that doesn't make sense, that shouldn't exist? When I finally went back to my room, I was different. I kept the overhead light on all night, the baseball nightlight abandoned in a drawer. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, made me jump. I'd lie awake, clutching my flashlight, staring at the window, waiting for that shadow to come back. It never did, not like that first night, but the fear stayed. I started noticing small things. The closet door would be open just a crack, even though I'd slammed it shut. The damp earth smell would linger in my room some mornings, faint but there. Once, I found my superhero posters slightly askew, like someone had brushed past them. I told myself it was the wind, the house, anything but that. School wasn't much better. I was distracted, zoning out in class, jumping at sudden noises. My friends noticed, teasing me about being scared of my own shadow. I laughed it off, but it hurt, because they didn't know. They hadn't seen what I'd seen. My parents tried to help. My dad took me fishing, my mom baked my favorite cookies, but nothing could shake the feeling that something was still there, lurking just out of sight. The history uncovered. We moved out of that house a year later, and I was so relieved I could have cried. We settled in a new place, a modern apartment in a nearby town, all clean lines and bright lights. I felt safer there, but I never forgot that house. Years later, when I was in high school, I got curious. I started digging into the history of that old place, looking for answers. What I found made my stomach drop. Our house was built in the 1920s on land that used to be part of an old cemetery. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in the early 1900s, the town decided to expand, and they moved the cemetery to make room for houses. They relocated the headstones, but, well, you know how that goes. Not everything gets moved. There were stories whispers, really about people who lived in those houses, seeing things. Shadows in windows, voices at night, figures that vanished when you looked too long. One old article mentioned a family in the 1950s who fled our house after their daughter swore she saw a tall man with no face in her room. Reading that, I felt sick. It was too close to what I'd seen. I tried talking to my parents about it, but they brushed it off. Old houses, old stories, my dad said. My mom was quieter, though. Like, she believed me a little, but didn't want to admit it. I never pushed it. Some things are better left alone. The lasting impact. To this day, I can't explain what I saw. Was it a ghost? A spirit tied to that old cemetery? Something else? Something older? All I know is it was real, and it was in my room. I'm grown now, with a place of my own, but that night still haunts me. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed, I feel that heavy air again, that faint smell of damp earth. I'll wake up at 2 a.m., my heart racing, certain I heard a scratch, scratch, scratch from the corner of the room. I keep a flashlight by my bed, even now, and I never sleep with the lights off, not completely. I've read about sleep paralysis, hallucinations, all the rational explanations, but they don't fit. I was awake, sitting up, moving. I saw that figure, felt its gaze, smelled that decay. It wasn't a dream. It was there. And some part of it might still be out there, in that house, waiting for the next kid to move in, the next person to turn off the light. And that's my story, folks. The night I saw something in my room that I'll never forget, a moment that changed how I see the world. If you've ever had an experience like that, something you can't explain, something that still makes your heart race, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And maybe, just maybe, keep a flashlight handy tonight. Because you never know what's standing in the shadows, watching, waiting for the dark. Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon? Hey everybody, if you love stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, you're in for a treat. This one's a fan favorite, and for good reason. It's creepy, it's intense, and it'll make you think twice about hiking alone. Today, we're diving into the legend of Bell's Canyon, a tale about a guy named Matt who went into the wilderness of Washington State and ran into something he can't explain. So, grab a cozy blanket, maybe dim the lights, and let's get started. The setup: meet Matt. He's 25, a hotshot banker from New York City. His life is all about big deals, late nights, and nonstop stress. Wall Street was killing him, so whenever he got the chance, Matt would ditch the city for the great outdoors. This guy wasn't just some weekend camper, okay? He knew his stuff how to read a map, build a fire, survive in the wild. He was the real deal. In the summer of 2016, Matt decided to head to the forests near Mount Rainier in Washington State. Now, picture this: massive pine trees, misty valleys, and that huge snow-covered volcano in the distance. It's breathtaking, but it's also remote. Like, middle of nowhere remote? You're more likely to see a bear than another person out there? That's exactly what Matt wanted. He planned to hike deep into the backcountry, camp in random spots, and just unplug. No phone, no GPS, just him and the wilderness. The first night, Matt hiked about 10 miles on his first day, pushing through thick bushes and rocky trails. By late afternoon, he found the perfect spot to camp, a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, with a little stream nearby. It was like something out of a postcard. He set up his tent, started a small fire, and cooked some freeze-dried chili. As the sun set, the forest came alive, crickets chirping, owls hooting, the wind whispering through the trees. Matt felt at peace. He climbed into his sleeping bag, zipped up the tent, and fell asleep. Around 2 a.m., something woke him up. A sound, not loud, but weird. A soft rustling, like something moving through the bushes just outside his tent. Matt lay there, heart starting to race, telling himself it was probably just a deer. The woods are full of animals, right? Nothing to worry about. But the rustling didn't stop. It got closer. Matt grabbed his flashlight, unzipped the tent just a crack, and shone the beam into the darkness. The light cut through the night, bouncing off trees and shadows. Nothing. No eyes glowing, no movement, just silence. He zipped the tent back up and lay down, trying to calm his nerves. It's just the forest, he thought. You're fine. But then, clear as day, voice cut through the silence. Low, gravelly, and chilling. It said, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" Matt froze. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it. A voice? Out here? He was miles from any trail, deep in the wilderness. Nobody should be out there. Was he dreaming? He pinched himself, definitely awake. Then the voice came again, slower, almost mocking. Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon? Matt's mind was racing. Was this a lost hiker? A prank? But Bell's Canyon? He'd never heard of it. And why would someone be wandering around in the pitch-black forest, asking for directions? His gut told him something was wrong. Really wrong. He decided to respond, just to see what would happen. No, he called out, his voice shaky. I don't know where that is, sorry. Silence. No footsteps, no rustling, nothing. Matt sat there, clutching his flashlight, waiting. Minutes passed 5, 10, maybe more. The forest was quiet again, but it wasn't the same. It felt heavy, like something was watching him. Matt didn't sleep a wink that night. He just sat there, eyes wide open, until the sun came up. The second day, when morning finally came, Matt was exhausted but relieved. He crawled out of his tent, expecting to find footprints or some sign of his late-night visitor. But there was nothing. No tracks, no broken branches, no evidence anyone had been there. He started to wonder if he'd imagined it. Maybe the stress of his job was messing with his head. He decided to push on. He packed up his gear, hiked another 15 miles deeper into the forest, and found a new spot to camp. This new clearing was even more remote, tucked against a rocky outcrop with a clear view of the surrounding trees. Matt figured he'd feel safer here. He could see anyone coming. He set up his tent, built a fire, and tried to relax. But as the sun went down, that uneasy feeling came back. The forest didn't feel right anymore. It was too quiet, too still. Matt sat by the fire, staring into the flames, trying to shake off the weirdness. Then he heard it again, that same rustling sound coming from the trees behind him. His stomach dropped. He grabbed his flashlight and spun around, shining it into the darkness. Nothing. Just shadows and branches swaying in the wind. He told himself he was being paranoid. But deep down, he knew something was off. And then there it was, the voice. Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon? Matt's blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever or whatever this was, it had followed him. 15 miles through dense forest, in a random direction, and it found him. His mind raced. Was this a serial killer? A prank gone too far? Something not human? He gripped his flashlight tighter and shouted, Who's there? Show yourself. No answer. Just more rustling. Closer now. Matt grabbed a burning stick from the fire, holding it like a weapon. I said, show yourself, he yelled. The rustling stopped. For a moment, he thought he'd scared them off. But then the voice came again, low and deliberate, just beyond the firelight. Aim that light away. Matt's heart nearly stopped. Why didn't they want to be seen? What were they hiding? His hands were shaking, but he lowered the flashlight, not wanting to make things worse. Okay, he said, his voice barely steady. I don't know where Bell's Canyon is. Just leave me alone. The voice didn't respond. But the rustling started again, circling his camp. Left, then right, then behind him. Matt's eyes darted around, trying to track the sound, but the darkness was too thick. For the next 20 minutes, the voice kept talking random, creepy questions like, got any food? Or, ever been to Utah? It was bizarre, like whoever it was didn't even care about the answers. Matt sat there, frozen, waiting for it to stop. Eventually, the voice faded and the forest went quiet again. But Matt knew he wasn't alone. The escape. The next morning, Matt made a decision. He wasn't sticking around to find out what this thing wanted. He packed up his camp at first light and started hiking back toward civilization. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made him jump. He kept looking over his shoulder, expecting to see someone or something following him. But there was nothing, just trees and shadows. After hours of hiking, Matt finally reached a ranger station. He told the ranger everything, the voice, the questions, the circling. The ranger listened, his face unreadable. When Matt finished, the ranger leaned forward and said, You're lucky you got out. People go missing out there all the time. And Bell's Canyon? There's no such place on any map I know. Matt felt a chill run down his spine. If Bell's Canyon didn't exist, what was that voice asking about? Who or what had been following him? He drove back to New York the next day, vowing never to go back to those woods. To this day, he doesn't know what was out there, but he's certain of one thing. Whatever it wasn't human. And that, folks, is the story of Bell's Canyon. A place that doesn't exist, but somehow, something out there knows its name. So, next time you're hiking in the middle of nowhere and you hear a strange voice in the dark, maybe think twice before answering, because you never know what might be looking for you. The Valley of the Headless Men. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, you're in for a wild ride. This one's a fan favorite, and for good reason. It's based on true events, and it's the kind of tale that makes you question what's lurking in the wild. Fans call this the ultimate creepy wilderness story, and trust me, it's got that bone-chilling vibe that'll keep you up at night. We're heading to a remote corner of Canada, a place called Nahanni National Park, better known as the Valley of the Headless Men. So, grab a warm drink, maybe lock your doors, and let's dive into a story that's as cold and unforgiving as the rivers of the north. The setup, picture this. The Northwest Territories of Canada, a place so remote it makes Alaska look like a bustling suburb. Nahanni National Park is a jaw-dropping wilderness towering mountains, deep canyons carved by rivers, and forests so dense you can barely see the sky. It's beautiful, but it's not a friendly kind of beautiful. This place is hard to reach, even now. You've got to fly in on a tiny plane or paddle for days down a raging river just to get there. Cell phones? Forget it. GPS? Spotty at best. If you get lost in Nahanni, you're on your own. The park has a nickname that sends shivers down your spine, the Valley of the Headless Men. Why? Well, it goes back to the early 1900s. Back then, gold prospectors flocked to the area, chasing rumors of a big strike, but some of them never came back. The most famous case was in 1908, when two brothers, Willie and Frank McLeod, went into the valley looking for gold. They were experienced prospectors, tough guys who knew how to survive in the wild. But months later, their bodies were found by a riverbank without their heads. No one could explain it. No animal tracks, no signs of a fight, just their headless corpses. And they weren't the only ones. Over the decades, more people vanished in Nahanni hunters, trappers, even tourists. Some were found, also headless. Others, gone without a trace. Locals started whispering about a curse. Some said it was a bear or a mountain lion. Others blamed outlaws hiding in the wilderness. But the creepiest stories came from the indigenous Dane people, who said the valley was home to something ancient, something not human. They called it a spirit, a shadow that hunted in the canyons. Whatever it was, Nahanni had a reputation, and it wasn't a good one. Fast forward to 2005. This is where our story really begins. Meet Sarah, a 32-year-old adventure guide from Vancouver. Sarah was no stranger to the outdoors. She'd led groups through the Rockies, kayaked whitewater rivers, and even summited peaks in Peru. She was tough, smart, and loved a challenge. When a client offered her a big paycheck to guide a small group into Nahanni for a week-long camping trip, she jumped at the chance. Sure, she'd heard the stories about the Valley of the Headless Men, but she wasn't superstitious. To her, it was just a wild, beautiful place that needed exploring. Her group was small. 3 guys, Mark, a thrill-seeking tech bro from Seattle, Tom, a quiet photographer with a love for remote landscapes, and Greg, a grizzled ex-military guy who wanted to test himself against the wilderness. They were all experienced campers, so Sarah felt confident. The plan was simple. Fly into the park, hike to a remote spot near the Nahanni River, set up camp, and spend a few days exploring. Easy, right? Well, not quite. The journey in. The group flew into a tiny airstrip near the park, then started their hike. The trail was rough rocky paths, thick underbrush, and steep climbs. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your lungs, and the scenery was unreal waterfalls crashing down cliffs, rivers glinting like silver in the sunlight. But as they went deeper, Sarah noticed something. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds chirping, no squirrels scurrying, just silence. It gave her the creeps, but she didn't say anything. No need to spook the group. After 2 days of hiking, they reached their campsite, a small clearing by the Nahani River. The river was fast and loud, its icy water churning over rocks. The group set up their tents, built a fire, and settled in. That first night, everything was fine. They cooked dinner, swapped stories, and laughed under the stars. Sarah started to relax. Maybe the stories about the valley were just that stories. But then, around midnight, Sarah woke up to a sound. A low, rhythmic thumping like something heavy moving through the forest. She sat up in her tent, heart pounding. The thumping stopped, then started again, closer now. She unzipped her tent and peeked out, shining her flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught nothing but trees and shadows. Mark, who was on watch by the fire, looked over. "You hear that?" he whispered. Sarah nodded, her stomach twisting. "Probably just an animal," she said, trying to sound calm. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Greg grabbed his hunting knife, and Tom clutched his camera like it was a weapon. They sat by the fire, listening as the thumping faded into the distance. Eventually, the forest went quiet again, and they all went back to their tents. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. The next day, the group explored the area, hiking along the river and snapping photos of the canyons. Sarah tried to keep things light, but the mood was off. Tom kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected something to jump out. Greg was quieter than usual, his hand never far from his knife. Even Mark, the cocky tech guy, seemed jumpy. Sarah chalked it up to the isolation. The valley had a way of getting under your skin. That night, they set up camp again, this time closer to a rocky cliff for extra protection. Sarah made sure the fire was big and bright, hoping it would keep whatever was out there at bay. But around 2 a.m., she woke up again. This time, it wasn't a thump. It was a voice, low, guttural, and barely audible over the roar of the river. It said, "Leave now." Sarah's blood ran cold. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside, scanning the trees. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Leave now." It wasn't coming from one spot, it was all around them, like the forest itself was speaking. Mark stumbled out of his tent, his face pale. "You heard that, right?" he stammered. Tom and Greg were already up, weapons in hand. Sarah tried to stay calm, but her heart was racing. "It's probably just the wind," she said, but even she didn't believe it. Then Tom gasped and pointed toward the river. In the faint glow of the fire, they saw Ida's shadow. Not a bear, not a person, but something tall and thin, standing just beyond the water's edge. Its outline was blurry, like it was made of smoke, and it seemed to sway like it wasn't fully solid. Sarah shone her flashlight at it, but the beam didn't touch it. The shadow just stood there, watching them. Greg shouted, "Who's there?" But the shadow didn't move. Then, slowly, it raised one arm, pointing at them. The voice came again, louder, almost a growl. "Leave or join them." Sarah's mind flashed to the stories of the headless prospectors. Was this what they'd seen before they died? The escape. The group didn't need any more convincing. They packed up in a frenzy, leaving half their gear behind. Sarah led the way, navigating by flashlight as they stumbled through the dark. The thumping started again, following them, sometimes close, sometimes far. Every now and then, they'd hear that voice, "Leave now," echoing through the trees. Sarah kept the group moving, her legs burning, her breath ragged. She didn't know what was out there, but she wasn't sticking around to find out. After what felt like hours, they reached a ranger outpost near the park's edge. They banged on the door until a sleepy ranger let them in. Sarah spilled the whole story, the thumping, the voice, the shadow. The ranger listened, his face grim. When she finished, he leaned back and said, "You're lucky. People go into that valley and don't come out. And those who do, they're never the same." He told them about the history, the McLeod brothers, the headless bodies, the disappearances. He didn't know what was out there, but he'd heard similar stories from other hikers. Some said it was a spirit, others a serial killer who'd never been caught. The Den people, he added, believed the valley was cursed, guarded by something that didn't want visitors. Sarah and her group flew back to Vancouver the next day. They never talked about it again, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her out of the valley. Sometimes, at night, she'd hear a faint thump outside her window or catch a glimpse of a shadow in the corner of her eye. She stopped guiding trips after that. The wilderness didn't feel safe anymore. And that's the story of the Valley of the Headless Men, folks. A place where people vanish, where bodies turn up without heads, and where something, maybe a spirit, maybe something worse guards the canyons. If you ever find yourself in Nahanni, listen closely. If you hear a thump in the night or a voice telling you to leave, don't wait around. Run. The Red Lamp. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's going to crawl under your skin and stay there. It's the kind of tale that fans call too disturbing to sleep after, and trust me, they're not exaggerating. This is the story of the Red Lamp, a seemingly ordinary object that turned one family's life into a waking nightmare. It's creepy, it's unsettling, and it'll make you think twice about what you bring into your home. So, grab a blanket, maybe double check your light switches, and let's dive into a story that's as dark as it gets. The setup: this story takes us back to 2012 in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. Picture a cozy, tree-lined neighborhood split-level houses, kids riding bikes, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. That's where the Thompson family lived. David, a 40-year-old accountant, his wife Lisa, a part-time nurse, and their 8-year-old daughter Emily. They were your average American family, living in a modest 3-bedroom house with a big backyard and a picket fence. Nothing about their life screamed horror story until the lamp came along. David was a bit of a thrift store junkie. He loved poking around secondhand shops, hunting for quirky furniture or vintage knickknacks to spruce up their home. One Saturday, he stopped by a small antique store on the edge of town. It was one of those cluttered, dusty places that smelled like old books and mothballs. While browsing, he spotted it. A table lamp about 2 feet tall with a heavy brass base and a deep red glass shade. The shade was cracked in one spot, but the lamp had a certain charming old-world, almost gothic vibe. The price tag said $15, a steal for something so unique. David didn't think twice. He bought it, loaded it into his car, and brought it home. Lisa wasn't thrilled at first. "Another one of your weird finds?" she teased, eyeing the lamp as David set it up in their living room. But Emily loved it. She said the red shade made the room look magical, like something out of a fairy tale. David plugged it in, and when he flipped the switch, the lamp cast a warm, crimson glow across the room. It was striking, almost hypnotic. The family decided to keep it on a side table by the couch, where it became a quirky centerpiece. For a few days, everything was fine. The lamp was just a lamp. The first signs? The trouble started about a week later. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you'd brush off. Lisa noticed it one evening while watching TV. The lamp flickered just for a second, even though no one had touched it. She checked the bulb, thinking it might be loose, but everything seemed fine. "Old wiring," she muttered, and went back to her show. But later that night, as she was heading to bed, she heard a low hum, like a faint electrical buzz, coming from the living room. She peeked in, and the lamp was off. But the hum was still there. She unplugged it just to be safe and went to bed. The next morning, Emily was acting strange. She was usually a bubbly kid, always chattering about school or her friends. But that day, she was quiet, almost withdrawn. When Lisa asked what was wrong, Emily said, "The lamp was talking last night." Lisa laughed it off, thinking it was just a kid's imagination. "Lamps don't talk, sweetie," she said. But Emily insisted. "It wasn't words," she whispered. "It was whispers. Like it was trying to tell me something." Lisa felt a chill, but chalked it up to Emily having a bad dream. Kids, right? That night, David woke up around 3 a.m. to a strange noise. A soft, rhythmic tapping like someone knocking lightly on glass. He lay there, listening, his heart starting to race. The sound was coming from downstairs. He grabbed his phone, using its light to guide him, and crept down to the living room. The tapping stopped as he entered, but the air felt heavy, thick, like walking through fog. The red lamp was unplugged, just as Lisa had left it, but its shade seemed to glow faintly, even without power. David blinked, thinking his eyes were playing tricks. He checked the plug, the bulb, everything, nothing was on. Shaking his head, he went back to bed, telling himself he was just tired. Things get worse. Over the next few days, the weirdness ramped up. The lamp started turning on by itself, casting that eerie red glow across the living room at odd hours. David swore he'd unplugged it, but every morning, there it was, plugged in and glowing. Lisa started having nightmares, vivid, awful dreams about a figure standing in their backyard, its face hidden in shadow, holding a red light. She'd wake up sweating, the smell of smoke lingering in her nose, even though nothing was burning. Emily's behavior got stranger too. She'd sit for hours, staring at the lamp, her eyes glazed over. When David asked what she was doing, she'd say, "It's telling me a story." He tried to laugh it off, but her words sent a shiver down his spine. One night, he caught her sleepwalking, standing right in front of the lamp, whispering to it. Not words, just sounds. Low, guttural noises that didn't sound like his daughter. He shook her awake, and she started crying, saying, "It won't let me go." That was the first time David felt real fear. Then came the physical signs. The family started finding scratches on the furniture, deep, jagged marks that looked like they'd been clawed by something sharp. The living room walls had faint burn marks, like someone had held a flame too close, but no one had lit a fire. The worst was the smell of sickly, rotting stench that seemed to come from the lamp itself. David took it apart, thinking maybe something was stuck inside, but the lamp was clean. Too clean, almost, like it had never been used before he bought it. Lisa did some digging online, trying to find out where the lamp came from. The antique store's website was bare bones, but she called the owner, an older woman named Ruth. When Lisa described the lamp, Ruth went quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "You need to get rid of that thing, now." Ruth explained that the lamp had been in her shop for years, passed from one owner to another. Nobody kept it long. People said it brought bad luck, accidents, illnesses, even deaths. One man claimed it spoke to him, telling him to do things, horrible things. Ruth had tried to destroy it once, but the next day, it was back in her shop, unbroken. She'd sold it to David just to be rid of it. The breaking point, by now, the Thompsons were terrified. David wanted to throw the lamp out, but Lisa was scared that would make things worse. They decided to lock it in the garage, wrapped in a blanket, until they could figure out what to do. But that night, the house went crazy. Doors slammed shut on their own. The power flickered on and off. And Emily, she started screaming from her room. David and Lisa ran upstairs to find her standing on her bed, eyes wide, pointing at the ceiling. "It's here!" she screamed. "It's in the walls!" David looked up, and his heart stopped. The ceiling was moving. Not shaking, but rippling like water. And in the center, a faint red glow pulsed, like the lamp was shining through from the garage below. The air was thick with that rotting smell, and the temperature dropped so fast their breath fogged. Lisa grabbed Emily and ran downstairs, while David stood frozen, watching as the glow grew brighter. Then he heard Ida's voice, low and raspy, coming from everywhere and nowhere. It said, "You can't hide it." David bolted after his family. They huddled in the kitchen, Emily sobbing, Lisa praying under her breath. The voice kept talking, muttering words they couldn't understand, mixed with laughter that sounded wrong, not human. David made a snap decision. He ran to the garage, grabbed the lamp, and threw it into the backyard. It hit the ground with a crash, the red shade shattering. The voice stopped. The air felt normal again. For a moment, they thought it was over. But the next morning, the lamp was back. Not in the backyard, but on the living room table, fully intact. No cracks, no damage. And it was on, casting that red glow across the room. Emily refused to go near it. Lisa was shaking, saying they had to leave the house. David didn't argue. They packed a bag, grabbed Emily, and drove to a hotel. That night, Lisa called a local priest who agreed to come bless the house. But when they returned the next day, the lamp was gone. Not broken, not thrown out, just gone. The aftermath. The Thompsons never went back to that house. They sold it at a loss and moved to a new city, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But the experience changed them. Emily stopped talking about the lamp, but she'd wake up screaming some nights, saying she saw a red light in her dreams. Lisa became obsessed with researching cursed objects, trying to understand what they'd encountered. David? He swore off thrift stores for good. Years later, Lisa found a forum online where people shared stories about the red lamp. Different towns, different decades, but the details were the same: a brass base, a cracked red shade, and a presence that wouldn't let go. Some said it was possessed by a spirit, others by something darker, something that fed on fear. One post claimed the lamp always found its way back to that antique store in Portland, waiting for its next owner. And that's the story of the red lamp, folks. A simple purchase that turned a family's life upside down. If you ever come across a lamp like that brass base, red shade, maybe a little too cheap, do yourself a favor. Walk away. Because some things aren't just objects, they're invitations. Invitations to something you don't want to meet. So, what do you think? Ever brought home something that felt off? Drop it in the comments. And maybe, just maybe, check your lamps tonight. You never know what's glowing in the dark. The Nutty Putty Cave. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's gonna hit you hard. It's based on a true story, and it's not just creepy, it's heartbreaking. Fans say this one's a gut punch. And trust me, they're not wrong. It's the kind of tale that makes you rethink what it means to push your limits. Today, we're diving into the story of Nutty Putty Cave, a place where one man's adventure turned into a nightmare that no one could have seen coming. So, settle in, maybe grab some tissues, and let's get into a story that's as real as it gets. The setup. This takes us back to 2009 in the deserts of Utah, about an hour south of Salt Lake City. Picture a wide, dusty, landscaped rock formations, scrubby bushes, and not much else for miles. Tucked away in this desolate area is Nutty Putty Cave, a limestone cavern that's a magnet for cavers. It's not a tourist spot with guided tours or fancy lights. This is a raw, wild cave full of tight passages and twisting tunnels. For experienced cavers, it's a playground. For the unprepared, it's a death trap. Enter John Jones, a 26-year-old medical student from St. George, Utah. John was the kind of guy everybody loved, charming, adventurous, and always up for a challenge. He was married to his high school sweetheart, Emily, and they had a 1-year-old daughter, Lizzie. John was studying to become a pediatric cardiologist, but when he wasn't hitting the books, he was out exploring. He'd been caving since he was a kid, growing up with his brothers in a family that loved the outdoors. Nutty Putty wasn't new to him. He'd explored it before and knew its reputation for tight squeezes and tricky passages. But to John, that was part of the thrill. In November 2009, John decided to take a break from his studies and organize a caving trip with his brother, Dan, and a group of friends. The plan was to spend a day in Nutty Putty, exploring some of its deeper sections. John was excited. This was his chance to share his passion with his buddies and maybe push himself a little further than last time. Emily was a bit nervous about the trip, but John reassured her. "I've done this 100 times," he said, kissing her goodbye. "I'll be back for dinner." Into the cave. The group arrived at Nutty Putty on a chilly November morning. The cave's entrance is a small, unassuming hole in the ground, barely wide enough for a person to slip through. Inside, it's a maze of tunnels, some as wide as a hallway, others so tight you have to crawl on your belly inch by inch. The air is damp, the walls slick with moisture, and the temperature hovers around 60 degrees no matter the season. John, Dan, and their friends geared up helmets. Headlamps, knee-pad sand started their descent. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. The group navigated familiar sections of the cave, laughing and joking as they went. John, always the leader, suggested they try a tougher passage called the Birth Canal, a narrow-shaped tunnel known for its claustrophobic squeeze. It wasn't for beginners, but John was confident. He'd done tight passages before, and he wanted to show his friends what Nutty Putty was really about. John went first, sliding into the birth canal head first. The tunnel was barely wider than his shoulders, the walls pressing against his chest as he inched forward. He exhaled to make himself smaller, a trick cavers use to fit through tight spots. Dan followed close behind, with the others waiting at a wider section. The group's headlamps cast flickering shadows on the walls, and their voices echoed in the cramped space. "You good, John?" Dan called out. "Yeah, I'm good," John shouted back, his voice muffled. He was about 400 feet into the cave, deep underground, when he reached a fork in the tunnel. One path led to a known section, but the other, a narrow, downward-sloping chute, looked uncharted. John, curious and confident, decided to explore it. "I'm going to check this out," he said, his voice full of excitement. He slid into the chute, headfirst, into a passage so tight his arms were pinned to his sides. The trap. At first, John thought he'd found a new route. The chute was narrow, but he'd been in worse. He wiggled forward, his headlamp lighting up the smooth limestone walls. But then the tunnel took a sharp, downward turn, steeper than he expected. Gravity pulled him forward, and before he could stop himself, he was sliding. The passage got tighter, squeezing his chest, his hips, his legs. He tried to push back, but his arms were stuck. He was wedged in, upside down, in a space no wider than a coffin. John's breathing quickened. "Dan!" he shouted. "I'm stuck!" His voice was strained, echoing in the tiny space. Dan, still in the birth canal, froze. "Hang on, man," he called, scrambling toward the chute. The others heard the panic in John's voice and rushed to help, but the tunnel was too narrow for more than one person at a time. Dan reached the edge of the chute and shone his headlamp down. John was about 10 feet below, his face red from being upside down, his body jammed into the rock. "Stay calm, John," Dan said, trying to keep his own voice steady. "We'll get you out." But inside, Dan was freaking out. The chute was too tight for him to climb down, and John's position, head first, upside down, was dangerous. Blood was rushing to John's head, making it hard for him to breathe. The group radioed for help, but Nutty Putty was remote, and rescue teams were hours away. They had to act fast. John tried to stay calm, cracking jokes to keep his spirits up. "Guess I found the VIP section," he said, his voice weak. But the pressure on his chest was intense, and every breath was a struggle. The cave walls were cold and unyielding, gripping him like a vice. He couldn't move his arms to push himself out, and the angle made it impossible to back up. The group took turns talking to him, trying to keep him awake, while they waited for rescue. The rescue attempt. By late afternoon, a volunteer rescue team arrived at experienced cavers and paramedics who knew Nutty Putty's dangers. They rigged a pulley system to try pulling John out, using ropes and harnesses to distribute the force, but the chute's angle and narrowness made it nearly impossible. Every time they pulled, John winced in pain. The ropes were cutting into his skin, and the rock was scraping his body raw. The rescuers worked for hours, their headlamps bobbing in the dark, their voices tense but focused. Above ground, word spread fast. Emily drove to the cave with Lizzie, her heart in her throat. She stood by the entrance, praying as volunteers updated her. "He's strong," they told her. "He's fighting." But Emily could hear the worry in their voices. Inside the cave, John was fading. The upside-down position was taking its toll. His heart was struggling to pump blood, and his lungs couldn't expand fully. He started slipping in and out of consciousness, his words slurring. "Tell Emily I love her," he whispered to Dan. "Tell Lizzie her daddy's proud." The rescuers tried everything, chiseling the rock, using lubricants to reduce friction, even drilling to widen the passage. But the cave was relentless. Every attempt failed, and the clock was ticking. By midnight, after nearly 20 hours, John's breathing became shallow. A paramedic, Susie, crawled as close as she could, holding his hand through a tiny gap in the rock. "You're not alone, John," she said, tears in her eyes. John squeezed her hand weakly, then went still. The aftermath? John didn't make it out. After 27 hours trapped in the cave, his body gave out. The rescue team was devastated. They'd done everything possible, but Nutty Putty had won. Emily was inconsolable, clutching Lizzie as the news sank in. The cave was sealed shortly after, declared too dangerous for future exploration. John's body remains there, a permanent part of the limestone tomb that claimed him. The story of Nutty Putty Cave spread across the world, a tragic reminder of nature's power and the risks of adventure. Emily later shared John's love for caving with her daughter, teaching her to respect the wild but never fear it. The caving community mourned John, a man who lived for exploration and died chasing his passion. And that's the story of Nutty Putty Cave, folks. A place where one wrong turn can change everything. It's a tale of courage, love, and loss, a reminder that the earth holds secrets we may never fully understand. If you're ever tempted to push your limits in a place like that, think of John. And maybe, just maybe, stay above ground. So, what do you think? Ever been in a situation where you felt trapped, literally or figuratively? Drop it in the comments. And next time you're near a cave, listen closely. The earth has a way of telling its own stories. This man terrified the FBI. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, you're in for a wild one. This tale is a fan favorite, and for good reason. It's packed with twists, tension, and a villain so cunning he made the FBI sweat. We're talking about a guy who didn't just break the law, he toyed with the people chasing him like a cat playing with a mouse. Today, we're diving into the story of a man who terrified the FBI, a mastermind who always seemed one step ahead. So, grab a coffee, maybe lock the windows, and let's get into a story that'll keep you guessing until the very end. The setup: this story takes us back to the late 1990s in the heart of Chicago, Illinois. Picture a bustling city, skyscrapers gleaming, Lake Michigan sparkling, and streets alive with people. But beneath the surface, Chicago had a dark side. Crime was rampant in certain neighborhoods, and the FBI's Chicago field office was working overtime to keep up. They dealt with mob bosses, drug rings, you name it. But in 1998, they met their match, a man they called the Ghost. His real name was Victor Kane, a 34-year-old nobody, or so it seemed. Victor wasn't your typical criminal. He didn't have a rap sheet a mile long or a flashy persona. He was average-looking, medium height, brown hair, the kind of guy you'd pass in a grocery store and never notice. He grew up in a quiet Chicago suburb, worked odd jobs as a mechanic, and kept to himself. But Victor had a secret. He was a genius. Not the good at math kind of genius, but the kind who could plan a crime so perfectly it was like a work of art. The FBI first heard of Victor in early 1998 when a string of high-profile bank heists hit Chicago. These weren't smash-and-grab jobs. They were surgical vaults emptied, security systems disabled, no trace left behind, millions of dollars vanished, and the only clue was a single playing card left at each scene, the ace of spades. The media ate it up, calling the thief the ace. The FBI, though, wasn't amused. They knew they were dealing with someone dangerous, someone who didn't just want money, he wanted to prove he was smarter than them. The first move: the FBI put together a task force led by Agent Laura Bennett, a 15-year veteran known for cracking tough cases. Laura was sharp, relentless, and didn't scare easily. But Victor? He got under her skin. The first big break came in March 1998, when a security camera caught a blurry image of a man near a bank the night before a heist. It wasn't much, just a grainy figure in a dark coat, but it was enough to start building a profile. The FBI combed through records, interviewed informants, and finally got a name: Victor Kane. Laura's team raided Victor's apartment, expecting to find evidence cache, tools, maybe even a stash of those ace of spades cards. But the place was clean. Too clean. No fingerprints, no personal items, just a bare mattress and a single light bulb. It was like nobody lived there. Laura felt a chill. This wasn't just a thief. This was someone who knew they were coming. Then, the phone rang. Not Laura's cell, but the landline in Victor's empty apartment. She hesitated, then picked it up. A calm, almost cheerful voice said, "You're looking in the wrong place, Agent Bennett." The line went dead. Laura's blood ran cold. How did he know her name? How did he know she was there? The team swept the apartment for bugs nothing. It was like Victor was a ghost, watching them from the shadows. The game begins. From that moment, Victor turned the chase into a game. He'd leave taunting notes at crime scenes, always addressed to Laura. "Better luck next time," one read, written on the back of an ace of spades. He hacked into the FBI's secure email system, sending messages that vanished minutes after being opened. One email contained a photo of Laura's car, parked outside her house, taken the night before. The message read, "Nice wheels, be careful out there." Laura started sleeping with her gun under her pillow. Victor's crimes got bolder. He didn't just rob banks anymore. He hit armored trucks, jewelry stores, even a private art gallery, stealing a painting worth $5 million. Each job was flawless, no witnesses, no evidence, just that damn ace of spades. The FBI was stumped. They brought in profilers, tech experts, even a psychic at one point. Nothing worked. Victor was always one step ahead, like he could read their minds. Laura started noticing patterns. Victor's heists followed a rhythm every 3 weeks, always on a Tuesday. He targeted places with outdated security but high-value loot. She set up a sting operation, staking out a bank she was sure he'd hit next. Her team waited in unmarked vans, SWAT on standby. At 2 a.m., the bank's alarm went silent, just as Laura predicted. They moved in, expecting to catch Victor red-handed. But the vault was empty, and on the security console was a note. "You're getting warmer, Laura." She was furious, but also intrigued. Victor wasn't just a criminal, he was a puzzle. She dove deeper, digging into his past. She found out Victor's father had been a cop, killed in a botched raid when Victor was 10. His mother spiraled into addiction, leaving Victor to fend for himself. By 15, he was hacking school computers, rigging systems to change his grades. By 20, he disappeared from public records. Laura realized Victor wasn't just smart, was driven by something darker, maybe revenge, maybe a need to prove he was untouchable. The breaking point. In 1999, things escalated. Victor pulled off his biggest heist yet, a Federal Reserve transport carrying $20 million in cash. The FBI was humiliated, and the pressure on Laura's team was crushing. The public was losing faith, and the media painted Victor as a folk hero, a modern-day Robin Hood, but Laura knew better. Victor wasn't stealing for the thrill or the money. He was testing her, pushing her to her limits. Then, a breakthrough. An informant tipped off the FBI about a warehouse on Chicago's South Side, a place Victor supposedly used as a base. Laura's team raided it at dawn, kicking down the door to find nothing. Just an empty room with a single chair and a tape recorder. Laura pressed play and Victor's voice filled the air. "You're close, Laura," he said, his tone almost gentle. "But you're not ready. Meet me at the pier, midnight. Come alone." Laura knew it was a trap, but she was tired of playing his game. Against her team's advice, she went to the Piera deserted stretch along Lake Michigan, the water black under the moonless sky. She stood there, gun in hand, waiting. At exactly midnight, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Victor Kane, in the flesh. No mask, no disguise, just a man in a plain jacket, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "You're braver than I thought," he said, his voice calm. "But you can't catch a ghost." Laura raised her gun, ordering him to surrender. Victor just smiled. "Check your pocket," he said. Confused, Laura reached into her coat and pulled out an ace of spades. She looked up, and Victor was gone, vanishing into the night. The end game. The encounter broke Laura. She became obsessed, working 18-hour days, chasing every lead, no matter how small. Her marriage fell apart, her health deteriorated. Victor kept taunting her letters, voicemails, even a bouquet of flowers sent to her office with a note. "Game's not over." But in 2000, the heists stopped. No more robberies. No more cards. Victor vanished, like he'd never existed. Laura never stopped looking. She retired from the FBI in 2005, but even now, she checks old case files, hoping for a clue. Some say Victor died, others that he fled the country. A few agents swear they've seen him a face in a crowd, a shadow at a crime scene. The FBI still lists him as a wanted man, but his file is cold, buried in a database. And that's the story of the man who terrified the FBI, folks. Victor Kane, the ghost, a criminal so clever he turned the hunters into the hunted. He didn't just steal money, he stole peace of mind, leaving a trail of questions that may never be answered. If you're ever in Chicago and find an ace of spades lying on the ground, maybe leave it there, because some games aren't meant to be played. So, what do you think? Ever come across someone who seemed to know your every move? Drop it in the comments. And next time you're out at night, watch your back. You never know who's watching you. The Ghosts of Flight 401. Hey everybody, if you're into stories that are strange, dark, and mysterious, this one's going to send shivers racing down your spine. It's a fan favorite, and for good reason. It's rooted in real events, weaving a tragedy so devastating it left echoes that linger to this day. We're talking about Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a plane crash that shook the nation and left behind something unexplainable. This isn't just a story about a disaster, it's about what came after, when the dead didn't stay dead and the skies carried whispers of the past. So, grab a seat, keep the cabin lights on, and let's dive into the story of the Ghosts of Flight 401 tale that'll make you think twice about looking out that airplane window. The setup, picture this. It's December 29, 1972, and we're in Miami, Florida. The night is warm and humid, the kind where the air clings to your skin and palm trees sway lazily under a starry sky. Miami International Airport is buzzing with holiday travelers, families rushing to catch flights home for Christmas, their suitcases stuffed with gifts. Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, is prepping for a routine trip to New York City. This plane is a beast state-of-the-art for its time, with 3 powerful engines, a wide body, and room for 176 passengers. It's a marvel of 1970s aviation, sleek and modern, designed to make flying feel like a luxury. The crew is top-notch. Captain Bob Loft, 55, is a grizzled veteran with decades of experience, known for his cool head and steady hands. First Officer Don Repo, in his 40s, is sharp and reliable, the kind of co-pilot who catches details others miss. The flight attendants, led by Sharon Tate, a seasoned pro, keep the cabin calm and cheerful. The flight is packed families with kids, business travelers in suits, even a couple of minor celebrities headed to New York for holiday parties. Everyone's in high spirits, sipping drinks, chatting, or settling in for the in-flight movie. The plane takes off just after 9 p.m., climbing smoothly into the night sky, the lights of Miami fading below. For the first couple of hours, everything is textbook. Passengers doze off, the crew chats quietly in the cockpit, and the hum of the engines is a steady lullaby. It's just another night in the air, until it isn't. As Flight 401 begins its return leg to Miami later that night, a small problem crops up. The pilots notice a warning light on the control panel. The nose landing gear isn't locking into place. It's not a crisis landing gear, issues happen, and there's a backup system, but it needs checking. Captain Loft radios air traffic control, who instructs him to circle over the Everglades, the vast, swampy wilderness west of Miami, while the crew troubleshoots. They switch on the autopilot, set the plane to a low altitude of 0 feet, and focus on the landing gear. Loft and Repo hunch over the controls, flipping switches, checking indicators, trying to figure out if it's a faulty light or a real issue. They're so focused, they don't notice the plane slowly drifting downward, inching closer to the ground with every passing second. The crash. At 11:42 p.m., Flight 401 slams into the Everglades at 225 miles per hour. The impact is catastrophic, a deafening roar that shakes the night. The plane breaks apart on contact, its fuselage splintering, wings shearing off, and wreckage scattering across the swamp like a broken toy. Jet fuel ignites, sending flames licking into the sky, illuminating the dark, murky water. The Everglades is a brutal, unforgiving, place-muddy, teeming with alligators, and choked with sawgrass that cuts like razors. Of the 176 people on board, 101 don't survive. Bodies, debris, and twisted metal litter, the swamp, a grim tableau under the moonlight. The crash is one of the worst in U.S. history at the time, a tragedy that sends shockwaves through the aviation world and beyond. Rescue teams work through the night, wading through waist-deep water, battling mosquitoes and the stench of fuel. They pull survivors from the wreckage of some miraculously unhurt, others clinging to life with broken bones and burns. The scene is chaos, shouts, helicopter rotors, the cries of the injured cutting through the eerie silence of the swamp. Captain Loft and First Officer Repo are among the dead, along with most of the flight attendants, including Sharon. The survivors, many in shock, are haunted by what they've endured, their faces etched with the terror of those final moments. The investigation later reveals a heartbreaking mistake. The crew was so fixated on the landing gear, light a simple bulb, that may have been loose that they didn't notice the autopilot had disengaged. The plane drifted lower and lower, unnoticed, until it plowed into the swamp. It's a human error, born of focus and distraction, but it costs 101 lives. Eastern Airlines is devastated. The public mourns, and the survivors carry scars, both visible and invisible. But the story of Flight 401 doesn't end with the crash. Oh no. This is where things take a turn into the strange. The kind of strange that makes your skin prickle and your heart skip a beat. The hauntings begin. Fast forward to 1973, just months after the crash, Eastern Airlines is still reeling, but they're trying to move forward. To cut costs, they salvage parts from the wreckage of Flight 401 standard practice in the industry. Seats, galleys, cockpit instruments, even pieces of the electrical system are refurbished and installed on other planes, mostly L-1011s in Eastern's fleet. The airline doesn't think twice about it, it's just business. But the crews flying those planes, they start noticing things. Weird things, things that defy explanation. It starts small, almost dismissible. On one L-1011, Flight 903, flight attendants report seeing a man in a pilot's uniform sitting in the first-class cabin. He's there one moment, staring straight ahead, then gone when they look again. Passengers complain about cold spots in certain seats, even when the cabin is warm and stuffy. One flight attendant, Maria, is prepping coffee in the galley when she catches a reflection in the oven door man's face, weathered and serious, with deep-set eyes. She swears it's Captain Bob Loft, whose photo she saw in a company memorial. She blinks, and the reflection vanishes. Maria tells her supervisor, a no-nonsense guy named Carl, who laughs it off. "You're working too hard, Maria," he says. "Get some rest." But Maria knows what she saw, and her hands shake for the rest of the flight. Things escalate from there. On a flight from New York to Miami, a co-pilot named Jeff is doing a pre-flight check in the cockpit. He hears a knock on the door sharp, deliberate. Thinking it's a crew member, he opens it, but the galley outside is empty. He shrugs, figuring it's the plane settling, and turns back. That's when he sees him, a man in an Eastern Airlines uniform sitting in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the instrument panel. Jeff freezes, his breath catching. The man turns, and Jeff swears it's Don Repo, the first officer from Flight 401. "Check the gear," Repo says, his voice calm but heavy, like he's carrying a weight. Before Jeff can speak, Repo vanishes, like he was never there. Jeff's heart is pounding, but he checks the landing gear system. Sure enough, there's a fault of loose wire that could have caused a serious problem on takeoff. He fixes it, his hands trembling, and keeps the story to himself, too shaken to tell anyone. Word spreads like wildfire among Eastern's crews. Pilots, flight attendants, even ground staff start sharing stories, whispered in break rooms and hangars. A flight attendant named Lisa sees a figure in a pilot's uniform helping a passenger with her luggage in the overhead bin. She starts to thank him, thinking he's part of the crew, but he turns, gives her a sad smile, and fades away. A mechanic working late in a hangar hears a voice behind him say, "Don't let it happen again." He spins around, expecting a colleague, but the hangar is empty. The only sound, the hum of fluorescent lights. The creepiest reports come from passengers. A woman on a flight to Atlanta sees a man in a captain's uniform standing in the aisle, his hat pulled low. She asks if he's the pilot, and he nods, his eyes distant, before vanishing into thin air. When she describes him to the crew gray hair, weathered face, they exchange looks. It sounds exactly like Bob Loft. The haunting spread. By late 1973, the stories are piling up, and they're eerily consistent. Almost every sighting involves Loft or repo, and they're always on L-1011s with parts salvaged from Flight 401. One pilot, Captain Dan, swears he saw Repo in the cockpit during a red-eye flight, adjusting the controls like he was still flying the plane. He looked at me, Dan later told a friend, like he was trying to warn me. The figure vanished when the plane touched down, but Dan checked the logs and found a glitch in the navigation system that could have caused a mid-air issue. He never flew that plane again. Flight attendants start avoiding certain seats rows, 12 and 15, where the cold spots are strongest. Passengers in those seats report feeling watched, their skin prickling for no reason. One man, a businessman named Richard, feels a hand on his shoulder during turbulence, steadying him. He turns to thank whoever it was, but no one's there. The seat next to him, one of the salvaged ones, is ice cold to the touch. Ground crews aren't immune either. A technician named Paul, working on an L-1011's electrical system, hears footsteps behind him in the cargo hold. He calls out, thinking it's another worker, but the hold is empty. When he finishes the repair, he finds a wrench he'd misplaced lying neatly on the floor, like someone placed it there. The creepiest incident happens on a flight from Miami to Los Angeles. A flight attendant, Sarah, is serving drinks when she sees a man in a pilot's uniform standing at the back of the cabin. He's tall, with a familiar face, Bob Loft. She's sure of it. She approaches, but he turns and walks through the galley door. Not opens it, walks through it, like it's not even there. Sarah drops her tray, glasses shattering, and passengers gasp. She runs to the galley, but it's empty, the door locked from the inside. She doesn't tell the passengers, but she files a report, her hands shaking as she writes. The investigation. By 1974, the stories are too many to ignore. Eastern Airlines launches a quiet investigation, interviewing crew members, reviewing flight logs, and checking maintenance records. They find no hard evidence, no photos, no recordings, just dozens of eyewitness accounts from reliable people. The consistency is what gets them. Loft and Repo are described in vivid detail, Bob's gray hair and weathered face, Don's intense eyes and calm demeanor. The sightings are always on planes with Flight 401's salvaged parts, and they're always accompanied by strange phenomena. Cold spots, unexplained sounds, equipment glitches fixed after a warning. Eastern's management is spooked but desperate to keep it under wraps. Bad PR could tank their reputation, already bruised from the crash. They start removing the salvaged part seats, instruments, even wiring, replacing them with new ones.